Hello, my name is Rich Casselberry. I am the Director of IT responsible for network and security for Extreme Networks. And what I want to show you today is an application we developed called Purview. It's part of the NetSite suite of products, and how we use Purview to help solve business analytics issues. So Purview gives you really in-depth knowledge on what's running on your network, and allows you to answer a lot of different questions, not necessarily network related, but more business related. So we're going to do a couple of different videos talking about Purview. This one, like I said, is specific to business analytics. We'll do another one focused on network troubleshooting because Purview is an excellent network troubleshooting tool, but the focus of this one is really business analytics. So I'm not going to show you everything in Purview. Frankly, that would take a long time. There's a lot of different stuff in there, but I do want to show you some of the ways that we use Purview on a pretty regular basis on our own network. So this first screen, this is live data, first and foremost. So this is an unscripted demo, mostly because when I click on something, I'm looking at live data and it changes, so scripting isn't really possible. So that said, this is NetSite 6.1, which is a released product. This main screen here really gives you a quick overview of what's going on. So we can see how many applications are running, we can see the amount of bandwidth for the last hour. We can actually see for the last 24 hours, each green line represents 1 hour. Network performance was good, application performance on average was good, so no real issues. If we were having significant performance issues, you would see either yellow or red lines inside of these blocks. The next screen I want to show is the top applications tree map. This tree map actually shows you everything that's running on your network that you see. So for example, you can drill into specific types of traffic. So for example, cloud storage, if you want to know who's using what type of cloud storage, it's pretty easy to click in and see. Ironically, out of all of these, the one that we don't support is actually Dropbox. So if I want to know who's using Dropbox, I can actually right click, bring up top clients by bandwidth, and in a couple of seconds I can figure out which one of my users is using Dropbox. Now it's 44 meg of traffic, so I'm not really that curious, not really that worried about it. It's probably syncing pictures from a phone or something. But if I was, I could pretty easily look and see what other applications this client's running. If, for example, someone was uploading a lot of data to Dropbox, at the same time they were downloading a lot of engineering data, that might be cause for concern, and I may want to investigate that a little bit more. In this case, it's probably not that big of a deal, but I can actually go in, I can find them on a map. This is integrated with the rest of our network suite. So in this case, it's a wireless user. He's actually connected into our warehouse access point out back. I can get real specific detail on the access point on the client as well. And we'll talk about that more in the troubleshooting step. So back to reports, again, I can see who's using what, pretty easy to right click and know what's going on. This is actually really helpful trying to determine how much shadow IT there is. You may see applications or services running that you didn't even know were running. We've had several examples where we've implemented this at a customer site, and they assure us that they are on-prem only, they don't do any cloud, and one of the first things you see is a whole lot of cloud storage, or Salesforce, or things that IT just didn't even know about. So very useful from that perspective. Also useful to see what kind of social media is going on. We actually encourage people to be social. So Facebook and Twitter and Imgur are actually really good things to see. And you can, like I said, right click on any one of these and get top users and slowest clients and fingerprints and stuff like that. So pretty useful to be able to click in and see exactly what's going on your network. One important distinction between this and other products that you may be familiar with, this is actually, if implemented correctly, is all traffic on your network, not just stuff leaving going to the internet. So for example, you can see CIFS traffic and NFS traffic. That is local inside of the data center that you get visibility into. Now, from probably my favorite screen from an analytics perspective is really this browser screen, because this allows you to slice and dice data pretty much any way you want. Now, as you can imagine, not long ago we merged two pretty good sized companies, Extreme Networks and Interisys Networks, and there's been a lot of IT consolidation, and one of the things that we spent a fair amount of time actually looking at was, where does it make sense for applications to live? So for example, we have a web application called The Source, because it is the source of all information. It's actually hosted in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we spent some time trying to figure out if it made sense to move the application from Raleigh to Salem, because there's almost twice as many people in Salem as there is in RDU. So at first thought, kind of made sense to move it. But rather than just go on that instinct, we decided to actually drill into it a little bit more and really understand who was using it. So this browser screen allows me to look at locations by clients for all applications called The Source. And sure enough, if we look in the last hour, 41 people in Salem have used it, 30 people in RDU, 10 in San Jose. So again, it sort of looks like it may make sense to move it to Salem. But before we make that decision, what we also want to check out is the amount of bytes. So there may be more people using it in Salem, but where's all the traffic really coming from? And in this case, we can actually see, I'm going to switch this to a bubble map view because it's a little bit easier to see. But we can clearly see, even though there's more users in Salem, way more traffic in RDU. So it allowed us to actually make a better decision by having real network data versus using data that we were sure we knew the answer to. So again, being able to make decisions based on facts versus assumptions can make you save a whole lot of time. Now the other thing with The Source, when this first came out, we were talking to our field marketing guys, or team, and they were asking how many people were using The Source. And so we looked, and again, we were looking by locations, by clients, and at the time, there really weren't that many people in Salem using The Source. In fact, out of 500 people in the week that we looked, about 30 people had used The Source. And the marketing team was obviously not excited to see that low of an adoption, because they had assumed that everybody used it every day, because that's where all of the corporate data was. But in reality, a lot of people had never logged into it. And so they asked me, Rich, how come people aren't using The Source? And in my experience, is one of two reasons that people don't use an application. Either they don't know about it, they don't understand the value of it, or they tried it and performance was horrible. So one of the great things is, again, looking at facts, real easy to figure out how is performance for The Source for all locations. So I'm looking at application response time. I'm going to switch this to grid view because it's a little bit easier to see in grid view. And sure enough, if we look, application response time is great, network response time is great. So it doesn't look like a performance issue for people getting to The Source. It seems really more like an adoption issue, and so what we decided was we really needed to evangelize it a little bit more and encourage people to use the application. So we did that, and actually we see a lot better adoption now. But again, being able to make decisions based on facts rather than assumptions. Now, we've had other cases where we developed an application. It's an application called eBits. You can actually download it for your iPhone or your Android. That does speed test functionality. So there's an eBit server, an eBit client. We use it for internal testing and demos a lot. And we had built an iPhone application, and sure enough, as soon as we deployed the iPhone application, everybody came back and said, that's great, but I really want one that runs on my Android phone. I'm sure that probably has happened to a lot of other people that build mobile apps. So our app developers spent the next 3 weekends working on the Android app and wanted to see what the breakdown was between iPhone and Android. And we looked, and absolutely nobody actually was using the Android application. And he was a little bit unhappy that he spent 3 of his weekends on his own time developing an Android app, only to find nobody use it. Now, we drilled in a little bit more, and I am by no means a mobile application developer, but apparently when you publish in a lot of these application stores, there's kind of the final email, do you really want to publish this, that we missed. So even though we built the application and tested it and thought everybody was using it, the reality was it wasn't actually published. So again, having facts and knowing what's running on your network, again, can save a lot of time and a lot of face. So we were able to go back, publish application in the Android store, re-email people, and say it's now really available. You can break down by location, by profile. Profile, if you think about Active Directory groups, it can correlate into that. So for example, if you want to know who in sales is using social media, One of the things that we've also found is doing it by username is handy, right? So imagine you have one salesperson who consistently does 200% of their quota. You may want to understand what tools they're using versus the other sales team. I heard a story, a joke, I guess, many years ago, and it goes somewhat like this. The CFO walks into the CEO's office and says, I don't want to say anything, but Bill's the number one sales guy, but I'm told he spends all of his time on his boat. What do you want to do? And CEO looks at him, he says, I want to buy everybody a boat, right? Because clearly that's why Bill is so good at sales, because he had a boat. Now, I'm not sure that's really true or not. I'm not in sales, I'm in IT, but it's that same sort of idea, right? If there's one person who's a leading expert or just significantly outperforms all of his other peers, it may be nice to know what applications or how they use the network or applications. So you can encourage that behavior in other places. We've seen education places who do that with their star students to find out, what resources do their top students use that maybe their other students don't use. There's been some cases where it turns out that the top students use a writing lab resource that other people just didn't know about. So by letting more people know about the writing lab, they could get their students all to do better. So applications like that tend to come into play a whole lot. Again, you can break it down by device type, application groups. If you want to know who's using what types of social media, you can do that. So for example, we tend to be a very social company. We actually encourage social networking. So we can pretty easily see, who's the most social, what's the response time look like. What I really probably want to know is, how many clients there are, how many flows people use. But it's really easy to drill in and slice and dice. Now, one of the things we figured out pretty early on, there's a lot of questions you can ask, and you have the data on every conversation in the network. And we have by no means figured out all of the questions that you can ask, but we have figured out some of them. So if we go back to this main reports tab and you pull down, there's actually a lot of pre-built. So if I want to know most popular applications, most used applications for a username or a client, these are actually two different reports for a reason, because many users have multiple devices. So if I search by username, it will find the applications that I'm using both on my laptop and my phone, or I can look for a particular client, so just my phone applications. Slowest applications by location, bandwidth over time, location with most bandwidth. And then we build these industry dashboards for enterprise, education, healthcare, venue. You can actually build your own. It's fairly easy to customize these, but these are a couple that we pre-built to give people an idea. So I'll show the enterprise one just because there's not a lot of education traffic on our corporate network, but you can see how much breakdown is Box versus SkyDrive versus iSCSI, what our social looks like, what our Oracle and SAP traffic looks like in Salem. So give you a good snapshot of what's going on your network. One thing that's fairly unique to Purview, it actually ships with about 13,000 fingerprints. And again, one of the things we learned pretty early on was there's a lot of applications running on people's networks, and if you don't let people custom build their own fingerprints, you're probably going to miss a lot of them. So it's really easy to build custom fingerprints. It uses standard XML. It takes a couple of, maybe a minute or two to build one, but pretty easy to do. So we have some that are built for internal tools. If you want to know, for example, who's using SCCM, it's really easy to see what the fingerprints look like. And again, right-click and get information on who's using it. Okay, thank you for sitting through this video covering business analytics with Purview. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your account team or to webmaster@extremenetworks.com. Thank you and have a good day.